Hey, Mike here in Canadian Musician. Right now, it's a beautiful day in the beaches area of Toronto, in a park across the street from this fella next to me, Rupert Harvey, of course, of the, well, not now too recently reunited. It's been 2012 since you guys reunited.
Yeah, our first time getting back together after 30-something years.
Yes, but, you know, not to bury the lead here, from Crack of Dawn. If you're not familiar with Crack of Dawn, maybe some folks that kind of came of age as Canadian music fans post 1980 or so, but Crack of Dawn is probably, some have said, the best kept secret in the Canadian music history in a lot of ways, because you guys are a legendary and pioneering band. Crack of Dawn were the first Canadian all-black band to be signed to a major label. That was Columbia Records back in the mid-1970s. In Canada, it's hard to understate how popular Crack of Dawn was in the 70s. They outsold Legends Earth, Wind and Fire in both album sales and concert tickets in the 70s before breaking up in the late 70s. Rupert went on to also co-found the Juno-winning reggae band Messenger. And did I pronounce that correctly?
Messenger.
Messenger.
Messenger, man.
But enough of my talking. I want to get to the story. And if you don't mind, we'll make this a bit kind of biographical, so because you guys have an excellent story to tell. But before we get to new music, let's first start at the beginning. I believe it was 1970 when Crack of Dawn came together, if I remember correctly.
It's an incredible journey. Actually, in 1972, I was a kid. I was a young teenager, and I was on tour. I was underage. I wasn't even allowed in venues, but somehow I pulled it off. I was on tour with a band by the name of the Cougars. At that time, it was one of the only R&B touring bands in the city. Yeah. And after we left that band, myself and Trevor Daly, who is still with us to this day, we started to hit the streets looking for musicians after the Cougars broke up. And that was the beginning of Crack of Dawn. I believe I was like 16 or 17 years old at the time. And then shortly after that, playing locally in clubs and stuff. After we got all these players together, like some really key people at the time was Glenn Ricketts. We got him on vocals. We started out with a female vocalist in the very beginning by the name of Jackie Gabriel.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, but that didn't last too long. Jackie was very stern. And we decided to part ways, and we brought in Glenn, and then my brother, he's just a year and a half older than I am, but he was already a very well-known guitarist and world-class talent kind of guy. Yeah.
So your brother Carl Harvey.
Yeah, my brother Carl Harvey, who's the lead guitar player for Toots and the Maytals, which Toots is the guy that created reggae music. Yeah. Yeah, he's the guy. Yeah, that's the guy before Bob Marley. So my brother started touring with Toots after Crack of Dawn, actually. Yeah, but we brought him into the band, and we got Alvin Jones came on horns. Alvin had played with us a little bit in the Cougars, along with Trevor Daly and Mark Smith, and that was the core, the root of this band. And then we added people. We added people over the years, including with an amazing keyboard player when we got signed to CBS, which became Sony. Yes. I think it was 1974 that we got signed, but the band was together, I think, in 1972. Yeah.
Oh, because you all come from different backgrounds. How did you find each other? And was there, because you guys had a truly incredible mix of soul, funk, and R&B.
Yeah.
How did you guys find each other with that kind of musical chemistry?
Especially back in those years when it was pretty rare to bump into other musicians. There used to be this place called Club Jamaica, where a lot of when Caribbean, West Indian people came to this country, it was like, that was the spot. That's where everyone met. And even though it was called Club Jamaica, there was always a love for R&B music and reggae music, and other genres that were similar, like jazz and stuff like that, and also places like the Le Coq d'Or Tavern. So as a kid, we used to all venture out into these places and just be amazed at the guys that were playing in those days. And from there, we just kind of bumped into each other and say, "Hey, man, we're putting this little outfit together. Yeah. Would you like to come play?" Yeah. And then guy would say, "Yeah, let's try it out." And so it was a very organic kind of thing that happened.
What was the surrounding, like what was the predominant style in and around Toronto at that time. Like rock and roll obviously was, some would argue in the early 70s rock and roll was at its heights historically. But in terms of those styles in which you guys found that, that unique meld of sounds, so like I was saying, soul, funk, R&B, was that unusual in Toronto at that time, or was there a mainstream audience for it?
Well, you know what? It was pretty popular at that time because a lot of the nightclubs were hiring soul and R&B bands, but they were coming up from the United States.
Yeah, okay.
So the Toronto Strip on any given night back then, there was like 3 or 4 bands. I'd say 90% of them were American bands.
Yeah.
So when we came up and started to play R&B at that level, it was kind of unusual.
Yeah.
I mean, there was guys like the Mighty Pope that was around, and some other local acts. Like I said, the Cougars. We did R&B, even though most of us predominantly were from the West Indian background.
Yeah.
But we adopted this music mainly when we got to Canada. Like in Jamaica, we were into our culture and our music, which at the time, it was like ska and rocksteady and stuff like that.
Okay. Of course, 1972 and through the mid-70s, when you guys were taking off, this is pre-CanCon, so it was kind of really the establishment of a really healthy and strong Canadian, Canadian music industry. So it was still a time when most Canadian artists were feeling they had to go to the States to find commercial success.
Absolutely.
What was your guys' thinking at that time?
Well, I think that we were fortunate, I think, in the right place at the right time. And like I said, being a Canadian band and drew the attention of some key people, I guess the word got around that there's these young cats that are playing some serious funk. Now, let's go back a little bit to our influence. You had mentioned that before. We were influenced a lot by groups like the Parliaments and the Funkadelics. Yeah. And if you listen to their music, it is a fusion of rock and funk. So most of our backgrounds, I'd say, is a rock funk background that we fused in. And if you listen to my brother play guitar, you kind of get the idea that we had the Hendrix thing happening within the funk music, right? Yeah. So pretty much that's how everything got started. And when we were discovered, CBS sent a producer from New York by the name of Bob Gallo because they'd heard about us, and he came and sat in at a rehearsal, and he was very impressed with what he heard.
And just to jump in, Bob Gallo, correct me if I'm wrong, he's credited or noted for his work with Otis Redding.
Otis Redding, man, sitting at the dock of the bay. Imagine, like, we're young kids and we're getting produced by the same cat that just did Sitting on the Dock of the Bay with Otis Redding and multiple other artists. So it was like mind-blowing. We didn't even know what was going on. You're that young, what the heck's going on? Anyways, when Bob Gallo came in, he was very impressed at the rehearsal, and from there, CBS took us into a little recording studio to do a demo. After we did the demo, sent it back to headquarters, and they really loved what they heard, and rest is history. I mean, we got signed because of that whole experience, the demo recording and so on.
Did you guys know, because one of the kind of most noteworthy things in your guys' autobiography here is, you're often credited as being the first all-black band to be signed to a major label in Canada.
Yeah,
did you guys even realize that at the time?
No, we didn't know that at the time, and it wasn't ever a color thing for us. Yeah. It was just like a bunch of guys that could relate to each other, just getting together and jamming some music. Like when I was growing up, before that, this, I was in school, and say from grade 8. I had little bands together with my class boys, like some guys were black guys, Italian guys. We all got along back in, we definitely had a good group of people from different races and backgrounds that we've always interacted with. But this just kind of happened naturally. I think from coming from the Cougars, which was a black group also, it became very natural for us to try to seek out people.
Good.
Seek out people that had the same interest. Later on, we did. If you look at some of our early recordings, you'll see like we had a white keyboard player named Yatsik Sobata. Yes. Personally, to this day, one of the greatest keyboard players I've ever heard in my life. Really? From then to now, I really haven't seen anyone that could play like this guy. He actually ended up playing with Dominic Triano.
Oh, wow.
A famous guy, and he actually did a lot of studio work for the record label and stuff like that. And then I don't know what happened to Yatsik, but disappeared over the years.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but it's like, so we had our token white guy, but it wasn't really that. It was a guy that was equally as good as all of us, and we were brothers. Like, there's no division in this band. We loved each other. Simple as that.
What was the initial experience like when you joined Columbia before any of the divisions that led to the breakup of the band? Was it essentially, what was your reaction at first to being signed to a major label, and what was those first couple of years like being a signed band?
Well, for us, being, like I said, just some guys left high school to join this band, right? So it was just like mind-blowing, the fact that once we got signed, we were getting things called like per diem. we were flying out to different places in the country. We're doing major concert venues. Here's an experience that I'll never forget. The first time we went west, and so we landed in Edmonton, and then they were driving us in, first experience driving in fancy stretch cars. And we're driving towards a venue, and we're seeing like thousands of people in this place. And we're going, who are all these people? It didn't dawn us. They were here for us. They were there waiting to see us.
And you guys didn't know you had an audience?
We didn't know we had an audience out there, but at the time, our song was charted.
Yeah.
And it was nationally, right? So
it's all right. The key
it's all right.
Okay.
It's all right. The first time we went on a national tour.
Yeah.
And we get there, and there's like 15,000 people for our first show in Edmonton.
Wow.
Unbelievable.
I can't remember if this is a story you've told, but I was reading about you guys, obviously, and it might have been you, might have been Carl. I'm not sure. I just can't remember which band members this interview was from, but essentially they were talking about those initial trips out west to places like Edmonton and Winnipeg and such, and finding, like you were just saying, finding those audiences you didn't know you were there, but also the experience of being one of the very few black artists to be coming through town. And you would get people mostly friendly, but also strange. It was described, even just coming up to you and be like, I haven't seen one of you folks around here. And it might have been you saying this, but
it was
was it you? I remember you calling it friendly but strange. I could totally understand that. What was the experience like from your perspective?
I remember this like if it was yesterday.
Yeah.
This was in actually Saskatchewan, and we'd done it. We'd been there doing some shows, sold out crowds lined up every night, and we partied after. We're young guys, so we're to the party. We partied until the crack of dawn. So we were walking down the street, walking back to our hotel, and this van kind of slowly pulled up beside us. I'm from Toronto, man. When someone pulls up beside you, you think something's gonna kick off, right? But there was this little old farmer-looking guy. It was like 5:30 in the morning, and he goes, "Howdy," like this. We're like, "Yeah, how are you?" And he goes, "Never saw one of you guys before. Saw you on TV though, and that football and stuff, but never seen you in person. You all have a good time." And I go, wow, that was amazing. But like I said, it was friendly and it was nice. It was more curiosity.
Yeah.
There was no animosity at all. As a matter of fact, we've toured the country from coast to coast. And I got to say, Canada's a great country. Mm-hmm. We love this country. And of course, you have the individuals that are ignorant. And we've experienced a few bad things. Yeah. But I'll say 98% has been very positive.
Mm-hmm. In that respect, what was it like within the industry? You're talking there about the 98% of being positive.
I'm talking about the people, not institutions.
Exactly, and that's where I wanted to go with that. Within the institutions, within the label system and such, what was that experience like?
Well, the fact that we got signed, first of all, is a miracle. We had to be above the cut that we got signed, but put it this way, even the record labels face resistance in certain places and areas when they try to push us through. Mm-hmm. So they got a taste of from other institutions, right? And this is kind of really a touchy subject because some of these people still exist to this day and some of these institutions still exist. But, as far as people, again, very open, very accepting. Some of the institutions, slam door in the face, kind of situation that happened regularly, and we still face that to this day, unfortunately. If you look at my band Messenger, one of the things that we had to do in our early stages is to leave and go to California, and that's where we really built up the big audience. And once we got big in the States, all of a sudden we were loved here because we're a Canadian band. We're embraced by the American audiences, and we're doing major concerts up and down the coast and across the whole country. And then when we came back, we became big stars. As a matter of fact, in that situation, when we came back from tour, we did our album in San Diego. That's another strategic thing we did. We decided to record out of the country, right? And then we came back, we're like an international act, right? And I found that Americans, even though there's all the prejudice and stuff down there, when it comes to music and stuff and art, they're way more open than we experienced institutionally. People-wise, it's the same.
Do you get any sense that that has changed in intervening years, or is that dynamic still there?
There's still elements of it, and there's stuff that's ongoing right now. For instance, with the history that Crack of Dawn adds to this country, I think that we're an essential part of the tapestry of music here. To this day, no one there's one person in the process right now, but before that, no one came to us and wanted to know the history of our band or even maybe do a documentary. This is a part of Canadian history. I mean, if you go to the Encyclopedia of Pop Music, it mentions that. These guys were the first guys. You figure that one of the majors would want to come and say, hey, why don't we do a little documentary on that? That's a part of history.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, they totally ignore us. And as a matter of fact, the producer that we're working with right now, I won't mention the company, but she is affiliated with a big company. And she came and interviewed us and taped a rehearsal, loved the band, loved the vibe, went back to pitch the documentary to her company that produced anything she says. She gets it because she's a top-notch producer. They turned her down.
Strange.
Yes.
Even something like the CBC, I think this is the kind of story they would be all over. No interest there either?
No. They turned her down flat, and she was so upset. She goes, if someone had told me, I would not have believed, because I love my country and I wouldn't like to believe that this stuff happens. But
what's the reasoning they give?
Their reason is there's no interest.
Okay.
Right?
Jobs are great to interest.
Yeah. There is no interest in the first R&B band, black group to be signed to a major record label in the history of the country. There is no interest. So, but you know what? She is still pursuing, and now it's personal for her. So she is actually she's going to be filming at the Mod Club when we do R&B and Soul week.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And so going back, just to pick it back up, first album, the self-titled debut album came out. That was 76.
Or 70. Yeah, we got signed in 75. Yeah, around 75, 76. But, I mean, you remember, you were in the studio like a year before the record's released. Yeah.
And so you guys had two albums that came out before you broke up in the late 70s. Biggest hits were It's Alright, The Key, and Booby Ruby. Exactly.
Risque.
So following the second album, you guys were finding commercial success, certainly a big touring act. What led to the I guess, breakup of the band and departure from Columbia in the late 70s?
Actually, what happened, the band actually started to fragment before that. Our trumpet player, Dwight Gabriel, created the second version of Crack of Dawn. And by the way, they were also a great band. A lot of them were from Nova Scotia. Oh, really? And they played around for a while. They got some success, not as big as the original guys. But they did get released in Europe.
Was the second album that second iteration of the band, or was it the original?
It was. Oh, okay. It was. So the real original band was the first album, and then the offshoot came from Dwight Gabriel and Alvin, who's still in the band now. They started that other version. And, we love all those guys. You know what I mean? The problem is with the first version of the band is the record label at the time wanted to get rid of the horn section and change our sound because they said that we sounded too much like Earth, Wind and Fire, and it was a threat, we're threatening their market. So so it was politics, man. So they forced us, CBS forced us to fire our horn section, who were some of the founding members of the band.
That seems like really strange reasoning to me, because often when a band when a label has a breakout band like Earth, Wind & Fire who finds giant global success, often they want other bands that kind of sound the same to piggyback on that. Know what I mean? It's weird that they would go to you guys and be like, oh, we have to change you to not be like them.
I think we were playing at the Place des Arts when some company reps came up from the States and saw us and were blown away by these young guys playing like this. And one of the comments we heard backstage was, these guys sound way too much like Earth, Wind & Fire. We have to split this band up. Like, it was actually overheard by someone in their dressing room, and what they did from there is they separated the lead singer Glenn Ricketts from the band and say, hey Glenn, you're the main character in the band, so why don't we just sign you? And that's what happened. Yeah. Glenn went with the record label, and we went our separate ways. And in a way, it's a part of my destiny, man. I'm kind of happy the way it happened. I'm sad, but I'm happy because Messenger sprung out of that afterwards. Yeah.
What do you think could have, if the original group of you had stuck together, what do you think could have been the possibilities?
We were just on the verge of doing a huge European tour, and we were about to be signed by Bob Marley's management company at the time. Yeah. Yeah, and it's just really unfortunate. But, I always have to look at the positives. Like, I guess it was written that this is what was going to happen, because from there, like I said, I went into Messenger. We had big success. We became the first reggae band to be signed by a major record label in Canada, which was Warner Brothers. Yeah, I'm a firstie. Yeah, it's no accident, man. It's just the amount of hard work and dedication and discipline it takes. A lot of guys don't get that. In
the intervening years, like, you went off and did Messenger. Carl, like you were saying, went and joined Tootsie and the Maytals. Yes. Found big success with them, obviously. Escaping my mind, I know everyone kind of went splintered off into their various projects throughout the years. Why? It was late 70s to 2012, so like 78. Yeah, so as I make it 35-ish years between then and you guys when you guys reunited. In those 35 years, did you guys remain friends, stay in touch?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, we're brothers. As a matter of fact, in 1986, we did a short reunion, and there was a club downtown called the Blue Note. Okay. And we actually played there. They only intended to have us there. They intended to have us there for I think it was like a weekend gig or something like that. Mm-hmm. But it was so successful. By the second show, the place was packed with lineups, and they kept us for 2 weeks. Yeah. So and after that again, because I was in Messenger at that time, so I couldn't commit to.
You guys, even on a part-time basis, didn't want to keep it together after that experience?
No, I don't know what happened. My brother was constantly on tour. I was on tour with Messenger. It was very, very difficult at that time.
So the fast forward to 2012 and the official reunion. Essentially, why then? Why was then the right time?
This is like a real organic thing that happened. Like, I just got a phone call from, I think it was Trevor or Alvin, and say, hey, Roop, what do you think about putting Crackadon back together? And I'm like, well, why not? Yeah. Right? I thought about it for a while ago. Sure, man, let's give it a shot. Then we went about finding everybody else, right? So we found Carl Otway, the drummer, the original guy, and, my brother, when he wasn't on tour, he'd come in and rehearse, and we started just piecing all the original guys, as many as we could. Yeah. We got them together, and then at the time, Glenn had to go back to Jamaica, so we found Michael Dunstan, the new lead singer, and it's a really amazing story. 35 years ago, Michael Dunstan was in a band rehearsing beside Crackadon, and his dream was one day to play in Crackadon. No kidding. No. So 35 years later, he waited, and he finally got the position that he's always wanted. It blows my mind. That's why I kind of believe in musical destiny. Yeah.
Did you guys know all those intervening years, or essentially how did that come about?
Well, we knew Michael not really closely, but we used to see him practicing. Their band was also a well-known R&B band back in the day. I think it was Future Shock. I can't quite remember. Anyways, Some of the other guys knew Michael better than I did.
Yeah.
You know, I just really connected with Michael recently, but I knew who he was. And it's pretty incredible. Like when he told me that part of the story that I didn't know,
Yeah.
right? He told me, goes, I've always wanted to be with you guys. I remember when we were kids, we rehearsed beside you guys, and my dream was to be a member of your band.
Wow. With the reunion, was there a sense of protecting the legacy in the sense that like you guys are a part of history as we've been talking about? Was there a sense of we need to make people aware of this, people should know who we are?
Absolutely. I mean, it doesn't do any good for us or for our country to let that go, like let that slip through the hands like sand, right?
Yeah.
It should be something that's known, especially in the music industry.
Yeah.
Those people should know that. I mean, you have people coming out of Canada having great success like Drake and Weeknd and Daniel, all these other people.
Yeah.
We guys created that environment for them to be able to do that today. Okay?
Kind of speaking of those guys, and to kind of tie that into what we were talking about when you would guys in those, you know, in the 70s, you go out west and you may be the first black artist that some of the folks had ever seen. We now live obviously in a time when modern rap and R&B is as popular in Regina as it is in Los Angeles. Know what I mean? How do you think that impacts the culture in the sense that those divisions that you witnessed, even if it was friendly, there was still just barriers in the 70s that have broken down now?
Yeah, well, you know what? I will attribute that breaking down of those barriers a lot to music, but sports is involved also. You know, I mean, who would think back in my day that there would be like a darn black hockey player? You know what I mean? You stick to baseball and basketball, right?
PK is one of the best in the league too.
That's right. So things in general in society has changed over time. You know, kids don't care now, man. As long as you're hip, you know, if you're cool, you know, you're in. You know, you have certain people that'll never change, but that's fine. You know, you don't need to associate with those people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now to jump back to the present, the album you guys released in November of 2017, The Spotlight, which combines re-recordings of some of the classic tunes from the 70s with new material. First, what was it like getting back in the studio and also writing together for the first time in 40 years?
Well, after being apart, the first rehearsal was chaos,
Really?
right? But there was something there. You know, you could always hear when there's some hope, right? So we said, let's keep going, and we just kept up. You know, we rehearsed again, and it started getting better and better, and then we started to take it more seriously. Say, we should record, and then we'll do versions of some of the stuff that was on our other album, along with some new stuff. Now, here's the key, and this kind of answers what you talked about, like keeping certain traditions. We decided that we're going to eliminate drum machines and programming and stuff like that. And we wanted to do this stuff like when we were kids, and we did everything off the floor. Yeah. When you listen to the album, you listen to real musicians play their instruments. It's not like a producer's dream. This is like musician's dream. So we're going in there, we're playing, and afterwards we might do some overdubs. But the foundational stuff was all laid off the floor. And this is what I'm very proud of. A lot of this album was done 1 or 2 takes. Really? Right off the floor.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Yes. And then, horns would come in and overlay with, put the little cherry blossoms on top.
What was the reasoning behind doing re-recordings of some of, like, the half the album that's re-recordings of some of the classic tracks? Was that part to get recordings of those songs under your control?
Yes. Okay. Because as you know, the record label has all the original tracks, and they won't release them to us. Yeah. And
yet they're not exploiting them. They're on the streaming services. Why hold them and do nothing with them?
They would prefer to do that. I don't understand it. Speaking to that, recently Warner Brothers a few years ago re-released the Messenger stuff on iTunes and streaming and stuff like that. So I'm surprised that Sony, hasn't done the same for Crack of Dawn.
Especially considering now the rejuvenated attention that's on you guys over the last couple of years.
Exactly. And now that we're getting like really great airplay, both internet, because the world has changed. So before you had to depend on petitioning radio stations or you'd never get heard. Nowadays, there's so much internet radio and so many streaming services and stuff like that. So yeah, our music now, especially in Europe, has got a large following, and you know this, that we've been charted in several markets, including, I think, Burlington had us under their smooth jazz. We made #1. We made #1 in Montreal.
I heard Old School on CBC radio the other day.
That's right, and CBC is now playing us, and UK has got to be the best. Like there's tons of stations that are playing us, and we charted on quite a few of those.
And, was that European market there in the 70s, or is that a new thing?
It's brand new for us.
Why, do you understand why that happened?
I'm not sure. I mean, I think there's a new movement to like soul dance music. People, sometimes I think for everything the wheel turns and it comes back around, because that music was very popular in late 70s, 80s in UK. Yeah. So I think there's a resurgence of this kind of music, and we just put it out at the right time. That's one thing I could figure out. And we purposely, there's an old saying that a prophet's never recognized in his homeland. So we purposely decided to release out of country first, because that's the strategy we use with Messenger, and it really worked well for us. And so now we're starting to get embraced by our Canadian industry a little bit more.
How do you feel the new tunes compare to the old tunes, stylistically, and just the experience of writing them?
I really like the new stuff that's on the album. Yeah. I mean, I like the old stuff because of nostalgia and stuff. And what we did, if you listen to both albums, to the old one and this one, what we've done is just like change some of the arrangements. But it's the same song, but a little bit different twist to it. Okay. But as far as the new stuff that we're writing, I'm 100% in. Yeah. I love it. When a musician does a project, and a year later or 6 months later, you talk to them and they absolutely love the project, it's good.
Absolutely. Well, again, the Spotlight is now out. You can find it on streaming services. Unfortunately, can't find. I hope that changes one day. Find the first album out there.
We have to petition Sony.
Yeah. I know some folks at Sony if you're watching.
Oh yeah. Really important to remember that we are headlining at the R&B and Soul Music Festival at the Mod Club on June the 2nd.
And did I overhear you're also playing the Beaches Festival later in the summer?
Yeah, I think we're doing the Beaches Jazz Festival on July the 29th, at the Sunday. I think we're on stage at 5.
Cool. Catch a part of Canadian history. And Rupert, it's been a real pleasure, a real honor, man.
Real pleasure meeting you and talking to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, man.